Good morning. I hope your morning has started off well, and I really appreciate you joining us for our Facebook Live. We are at a park near our house, and actually Tamara has started doing a jog each day. She's doing a fundraiser for Stop Soldier Suicide, and with that she has made a commitment to jog or hike 100 miles during the month of September. I'll go pick her up, or yesterday I actually did a little walking with her, but it's some trails just off of here. And also today, or this weekend, is Labor Day. Often as a pastor on Labor Day weekend, I would focus on how we are to labor for Christ and talk about how we're to use our talents, gifts, and abilities in our service for God, which is an important thing to realize and to do. But today we are continuing our study on the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount are the teachings of Jesus that's found in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Anger, murder, and worship. These are all words that are associated with our text for today. So what is this all about? Well, let's begin with the first word, anger. See, as with Jesus last week, we looked at how it wasn't just the law, but the intent. And anger is the root that leads to murder. But what are things that get you angry? In our society, it almost seems like there's a societal anger right now that's building up. There's COVID-19 that has caused us to have to stay in. It's changed our daily routines, and it's caused many people to get angry. There's racial tensions that's caused anger. And there's this political divide that is just really building up right now. And so many of us get angry. And sometimes we go to social media, and I think that just fuels the anger, causes it to build up further. So when you get angry, what do? There are different responses that we can have to anger. One response is to hold it in. I'm going to just hold it all in and pretend I'm not angry. And often that leads you to explode on someone, often someone that you really love. Another thing that can happen when we hold it in, that anger can turn to depression, and we're really hurting on the inside. Another response is anytime we get angry, we can just lash out. I've known some people that are Christians that they almost feel like anger is their spiritual gift. Nobody's going to mess with me. Not a good way to respond. You know, sometimes we can work to diffuse it and find ways to be at peace and not have that anger build up. You know, sometimes we can take that anger and we can sit down and talk to the person that we're angry about and work through things in a positive way. We can also just in general use that anger for good. Let me share what I mean. When you get angry about injustices in the world, you can work to make changes. Anger can be powerful and can have a lot of energy. You know, as I was thinking about that, I thought about, the Incredible Hulk. You may remember the story about the Incredible Hulk. This man decides that he wants to build up and get strong, so he's a scientist, and he goes through this process, and he changes himself. And afterwards, anytime he gets angry, he turns into this Hulk, this green monster almost. But if you watch the show, you realize that every time he turns into that monster, he ends up, as that monster, doing positive things. He uses his power for good. Just in general, anger can be like that. We can use it for good. So what is anger and what causes anger? Let me share a definition that I found. Anger is an emotion that tells us that someone or something has interfered with our goals, gone against us, or wronged us in some ways. Anger can make us feel like defending ourselves, attacking, or getting revenge. What if we look at it another way? Anger is a sign that you need to take constructive actions. Anger is a source of energy to get things done and to solve problems. So how can we control our anger? One thing is when we get angry about something, just begin by relaxing. Not reacting, just relaxing at that point. Another thing is just to try to be at peace. Finding that peace with God and peace with others. Working ways to diffuse it. But also in anger, we should have empathy. Instead of focusing on how another person's behavior affects us, look at things from that person's perspective. We can use it for problem solving. Think about how you can work through this issue. When we're angry, we can be assertive without being aggressive. That's to communicate your point and your feelings while continuing to value the other person's point and their feelings. It's not always an easy thing to do, but it's important. And again, so much today, it seems like we get in social media, and instead of really thinking about another person, we just lash out and say things that we would never say to their face. 3 things to avoid is bottling it up, getting defensive, or lashing out. Anger can actually serve very positive functions when it's expressed properly. The important thing is expressed properly. Anger is like electricity. If it's used in a positive way, it can make a positive difference. Studies continue to show that when expressed properly, anger can have beneficial effects on the individual's health, their relationships, and their work. Think about it. Anger can have positive impacts. Socially, very positive changes come from anger. For instance, the civil rights movement in the 60s, the women's suffrage movement in the early 20th century. On an individual level, scientists have shown that angry episodes actually strengthen personal relationships more than half of the time. That was one that I read and I had to really think about it. How can angry episodes strengthen relationships? It's when we sit down and we get angry and we take time to talk through it. The person that's angry will express, what happened has really made me angry, and they will express why, and then they'll have a dialogue. I remember one time having a situation with some women in a church that had gotten angry. Much of what they were angry about were things that happened before I came to the church, but some that happened even after I was there. And so I went down and sat down and talked to them. Not a fun thing initially, sitting down with a bunch of angry women, but I sat down and they were able to express what had upset them. They were able to work through it, vent some frustrations, and we worked to positive results. Our focus today, our text relates to anger and worship. But before we look to the text, I want to look to a couple of other scriptures that relate to anger. Psalms 4:4 states, "In your anger, do not sin." Hear that, in your anger. We will be angry, but do not sin. Mark 3, a passage about Jesus. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal anyone on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. Jesus looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed with their stubborn hearts, and said to the man, "Stand up, stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Jesus was angry about the people because they were so focused on laws that they didn't really care about this man in need. This caused Jesus to be angry. And often when we think about Jesus' anger, we think about the story where he goes to the temple and people are buying and selling. And he gets angry and he runs those people out of the temple. Jesus was angry. With this background, let's look to our focal text. Today it's continuing the study on the Sermon on the Mount. We're at Matthew 5, beginning with verse 21. "You've heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to the judgment.' But I say to you, if you're angry with your brother or sister, you'll be liable to the judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you'll be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you'll be liable to the hell of fire." First of all, why would Jesus equate anger with murder? It's because anger is the root that can build up and lead to murder. We don't murder someone unless we begin by being angry with them. So what is Jesus teaching here? It was assumed that this judgment that he speaks of would be the judgment of a lower court for a minor offense. But how would you feel if every time you get angry, you had to go to court? Some of us would stay in court all the time. I don't think that Jesus was literally teaching that we're not to be angry. As we've observed, there were at least 2 occasions in the Bible where we find Jesus as being angry. And the psalmist writes, "In your anger, do not sin." Paul adds in the book of Ephesians, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger." In other words, work it out. Jesus is warning about how we respond to anger. We can also see how Jesus is building up degrees of anger. He first of all talks about anger as that first level, that first point, and you're liable to the judgment. In the second level, he states, if you say the word raka, or in the translation I just used, if you insult someone, you're liable to the council. Raka is a word of contempt. It can be translated as looking down on someone like, "I'm better than you," just condemning them. So you're angry, and then the second thing is you have contempt and you're looking down on someone. And the third thing, he said, if you say "you fool," you're in the danger of hellfire. So what's his point? It's like it's different degrees and it's building up. I'm angry, I have contempt, I'm calling someone a fool. Now, I don't think it's literally the word fool that Jesus is talking about. In one of Jesus' parables, he speaks of someone that's a fool. It's found in Luke 12. A rich man has an abundance of crop, and he says, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns, and then I can sit back and be satisfied. But God comes to him that night and says, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. This person was foolish because they were totally depending on material wealth. I don't believe that Jesus is aiming at a single word. I think his point here is that we can allow things to build up until we act. And we need to beware of how we can build up anger in our hearts to the point that we act on it. The law teaches that murder is wrong. Jesus says we need to go beyond the law. Anger leads to murder. Jesus says we need to be aware of our anger and how we respond to that anger. We need to work to get that under control and use it in a positive way. If you feel angry with someone, you need to be constructive, or you need to seek to find ways to diffuse it. We can feed the anger or we can diffuse the anger. That's our choice. You feed the anger by totally just focusing on how I have been wrong. It's all about me and how this person has wronged me. You diffuse it by looking at things from their perspective or seeking to bring some positive thing from your anger. In Romans 12:18 it states, if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. If it's possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace. Relationships are so important. Jesus' point is that we're to have the right heart and control our feelings before they build to a danger point. And again, in our world today, it seems like there's so much anger, and we can just get caught up in that anger, and we need to find positive ways to deal with it. Well, Jesus goes on in the passage to make a couple of additional points. In verse 23, when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar, and first go and be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift. To me, this is an interesting text, and it relates to anger, but it goes beyond anger. You can't be angry and truly worship God. If you have anger in your heart, it will affect your ability to worship. Here Jesus doesn't say, if you have done something wrong, go work it out. It states, if your brother or sister has something against you. Not just doing something wrong, but they have done something, you've done something that's offended them. Go and work it out. Our relationships with others can impact our relationship with God. Now, we can't always make things right in our relationships, but the point is we're to do our part. If you're in a position of leadership, people are almost always going to have something against you. Think about Jesus. He was crucified because people had something against him. As a pastor, often I had people that were against me because I wasn't doing things that they wanted to be done. I wasn't keeping them satisfied or happy. We have to do what we feel is right, but we also need to prioritize relationships and really work to make things right with others. So I want you to think about relationships. Is there a relationship that you really need to work on today to go to make things right? I heard one pastor, he said whenever he preached on this text, and he was pastor of a large church, and he's talking about this text, if you come to worship and you realize someone has something against you, go make things right. He said whenever he would preach on this, there would almost always be people that would get up from their seats and begin walking out in the middle of the sermon. Now, pastors, we typically don't want people to walk out in the middle of our sermons. But he said he realized that they were doing what he was teaching. They were going to make things right with others. They were working to restore relationships. Today, there may be someone that you need to reach out to restore a relationship because they have something against you. And that can take humility to go before them. I want to make things right. I'm sorry for anything I've done that offended you. How can we work through this? Well, Jesus makes another point in verses 25 and 26. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you'll be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid your last penny. Here the point is, get things worked out before you go to court. If someone has something against you, go make it right. This sounds like it would be good legal advice, but it's also about the overall theme of anger in relationships. Reconciliation with others should be our goal, not because of threat of court, but because we want things to be right with others. We want to be like our Heavenly Father. Anger, murder, and worship. Interesting words for a Bible study. Interesting words that we find in text. Anger can lead to things that are much worse. It's the root even of murder. Anger is a powerful emotion and can motivate us to do things that are positive. We need to learn how to control our anger and how to diffuse it. We need to seek to live at peace with all people. And this passage also relates to relationships and worship. I challenge you to work on relationships, work to be at peace with others. Where there's anger and conflict, you're at a pivotal point in your life. What will you do? Will you allow the anger and conflict to bring harm, or work through it to bring good? Here in our text today, Jesus makes what will be a radical statement. It's not just about murder that leads to something more. It's about the seed of anger that begins in our heart, and we need to work to have our hearts right. That is to be our ultimate goal. Let us have a time of prayer. Gracious God, today we realize that there's a lot of anger in our world. And in many ways, a lot of anger in our hearts. There's things that justifiably causes anger. But there's also things that we just allow to build up. And God, we just ask that you be with each of us, that we will work to realize the root of our anger. And to make it not about us, but really work to find peace with all people. And when we find that we're justifiably angry, that we can use that anger to do positive things. Use that energy in good ways. God, we thank you for your love for us. And God, we just ask that you lead us and guide us in all that we do. In Christ's name, amen. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. God bless.
God bless you.